Now, the Hunt Palmer Show.
Yes! I feel like I've been waiting for this my entire life.
You're listening to the Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
Jolly good fun. Jolly good.
Locking down the middle of the day.
America's favorite daytime fun show.
Live from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio. This is Hunt Palmer.
Hunt Palmer coming to you from Mercedes-Benz at Baton Rouge studio downtown in the capital city on this Thursday. Working towards the weekend. Appreciate you hanging out with us here on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge. Got Jacob Beck and Jordan Kitchens back there on the ones and twos. And lots to do here on this Thursday. Luke Johnson's going to be with us talking Saints at 1:15. I've got three players to watch this spring on the LSU offense coming up. Chris Blair, the voice of the Tigers, will be with us at 2:15. Had to bump Joe Healy back. He of the SEC extra team over at D1 Baseball. He'll be with us at 2:30 to talk about the SEC weekend to come on the Diamond. So lots and lots to do here. Lock us in for the next 2 hours. We'll start things the same way we start every day with our Genesis opening drive.
It's time for Hunt's Opening Drive, presented by Genesis of Baton Rouge.
All right, Tigers on the Diamond last night against North Dakota State, and 24 hours after LSU's worst start of the season, where you couldn't do anything right in the first 3 innings of the ball game, they came out to their best start of the season against a bad North Dakota State team. William Schmidt got LSU off to a pretty good start. And the Tigers sent 11 to the plate in the first and scored 7 runs. It was just an assembly line of good at-bats for LSU in the first inning of the ball game. Just a lot of deep counts, a lot of guys drawing walks. Line drive hits. Stephen Milam hit a rocket down the right field line. Into the right center field gap, I should say. And it was just a lot of really good at-bats against what we know is a bad North Dakota State pitching staff. They came into the 2-game set in Baton Rouge with a team ERA pushing 11. So you expected that LSU would score a ton of runs, and LSU did. I thought it was a big night for a few guys, specifically Jared Jones, who hit the 2 home runs. By now, you're very confident in that. And it's a deal where I, more so than the Jones homers, appreciate the quality of his at-bats game in and game out. And I say that because he's not trying to force it. He's hit some balls hard for singles. He's hit some balls hard the other way for singles and doubles. He has taken his walks. And then when he gets a pitch to drive, he's driving it. And it just happened that twice last night, he got pitches to drive that were out over the plate, hit the first one out kind of on a line to right center field, hit the next one out a moonshot to right center field. But I know Jared Jones can hit a ton of homers against bad baseball teams. I'm more so just speaking about his at-bats in their entirety for this pre-conference schedule. I've enjoyed his patience and his productivity altogether. Derek Curiel was phenomenal again in the game. 2 more hits, 2 more runs, 2 more runs driven in. He drew a walk again on base 3 times. Was fantastic out of the leadoff spot, and they'll continue to pencil him in right there. I thought Stephen Milam was great once again, had the RBI hit and scored 2 runs there in the first inning. And then you had Chris Stanfield down at the bottom of the order who had a pair of singles. He scored a run and drove one in as well. So kind of all the way through the order, you're seeing some productivity for LSU right now, which is kind of what you would hope for and expect at this point, quite frankly. Jay Johnson has stacked this lineup with the feeling that he should have a couple of really good hitters coming up in just about every inning. And when you start things off with Derek Curiel, Jared Jones, and Daniel Dickinson, you feel really good about that. You've got Milam sitting there in the 5 hole with Jake Brown right behind him, and you've got Chris Stanfield at the bottom. You've got a bunch of guys throughout the lineup who are getting on base at a really high clip right now, that are hitting the ball really hard. So that was really, really good to see offensively. I don't have any qualms with the offense. You went out there and in 6 innings of offensive action, scored 13 runs. You put up a 7 spot in the first, a 4 spot in the third, and then another crooked number, a 2 spot in the 5th. So you were good on offense really from start to finish in the game. That's not really my concern. And the pitching was not my concern last night, but I do think it's a more important storyline because it starts with William Schmidt, who is obviously such a precocious talent as a freshman. William Schmidt continues to go out there, and to me, he is a testament to the fact that with really good stuff, you can get a lot of outs. But right now, his stuff supersedes his command and his pitch execution. And that's what is keeping him from being dominant. Now, let me press pause. I don't expect him to be dominant right now. I expect him to go through some growing pains as a young pitcher. But he's also pitching out of those more often than not. I'll give you an example. Yesterday in the game, in the second inning, William Schmidt did not command his pitches very well. So you go to the play-by-play of the second inning, and he starts things off on a rocky note, okay? And it's evidence that, like, the good stuff that he had there in the first inning is not necessarily with him in the second inning. And so you look up, and all of a sudden the first two guys reach base. Davis Hamilton singles, he moves to second on a wild pitch, and then you walk Colton Becker. So you give up a single, you've thrown a wild pitch, and you've issued a walk. Nate Yeskie comes out to the mound, and William Schmidt gets a strikeout of time and long. But then he follows that up with another walk. So you've got the bases loaded with one out, and it's really self-inflicted. You've issued a couple of walks, you've thrown a wild pitch, you haven't done what you needed to do with your stuff in this inning, but you can still get out of it. And he gets a strikeout. And if you're just looking at the box score, you would go, look at that. Look at the kid. He's struggling with command a little bit, but he goes to 3-2 and he gets the strikeout. Big pitch. He didn't really execute the pitch. It was a fastball. It was high and outside, and he got a fortunate swing and miss. Luis Garcia bailed him out there. And then he throws a wild pitch and plates a run. And it's the only run he gave up. But in that inning, you threw two wild pitches, walked two guys, and hit a guy. That's the type of stuff that you've got to tighten up if you want to be a weekend arm in the SEC. And I believe that he will. But again, the same thing I said on Monday. I'm grading this LSU team on a championship curve. I'm grading William Schmidt on a tough curve. And he's been great. He was good last night. Last night was a positive outing for William Schmidt. No question about it. 4 innings. He only gave up 2 hits and the 1 run. It was earned. He struck out 7 and walked 2. He was really good, but he had a bumpy second inning. I love the fastball. It was 95 miles an hour. I love the breaking ball. That's always going to be there. He spins it as well as anybody in college baseball. And then one thing I really liked was the changeup he threw to get out of the third inning. That was a gorgeous straight change. And if he can throw that pitch effectively, look out. So I know there are a lot of people that are clamoring for change in the weekend rotation. Ianson's not dominating. Ianson's getting hit around. That's a guy they're going to have to move Shores up to Saturday, and Schmidt's going to go into Sunday, or Ware's going to go into Saturday. Like, I hear all that. I'm not there. I like these spots for William Schmidt right now. And I thought last night he did a really good job, but it wasn't quite as clean as you would hope. But that's to be expected for a freshman. I'm going to point out more things with him because of the immense talent, because of the expectation, and because of what we all truly believe he's going to be. I don't know if that's going to be 2 weeks from now. I don't know if that's going to be 6 weeks from now. I don't know if that's going to be next February. But we all think he's going to be a superstar at LSU. I certainly do. So for that reason, you're kind of nitpicking a little bit, and that second inning was bumpy. He got a little bit fortunate. I don't think an Alabama hitter, a Texas A&M hitter, a Tennessee hitter extends the zone on that strikeout. Then all of a sudden, you're walking in a run. You still only got 1 out. You're throwing a wild pitch, and it could unravel a little bit. But you got a little help, and he made that count. He did a good job through 4 innings. I thought that was really good. Jacob Myers with a pretty standard Jacob Myers inning there. That was in the 6th inning. He walked 3 and didn't allow anything else. He walked the bases loaded, but got out of it because his stuff is good enough that it's going to give teams at this level a lot of issues. Grant Fontenot came in and got hit a little bit, did walk a runner. walk a hitter. So it was the back end of the bullpen, just trying to get past this one. And now you turn your attention to one last pre-conference weekend against a bad North Alabama team. LSU should handle their business this weekend, and then we can finally point towards SEC play and really see what this team is made of. I thought last night was very positive offensively. Some very positive things for William Schmidt. There were some concerns on the pitching staff. They still threw too many wild pitches. They still issued too many walks. I don't want to see LSU in 7 innings allow 7 walks. I don't want to see as many wild pitches as you saw. Schmidt threw 2, Myers threw 1. I don't want to see the hit by pitches. Schmidt had 3 of those. Fontenot had 1. Like, too many free bases. Same issues you saw back in Frisco that have got to be cleaned up, but you're not talking about the very front end of your rotation when you're talking about some of this. And LSU's defense was error-free a night after some really poor defense that you saw from LSU. Some of that was from the pitchers, but you had a pop-up you didn't call in foul territory, and there were some issues on defense, specifically behind the plate last night. I thought LSU cleaned a lot of things up in the game on Wednesday. They played better defensively, and overall, it was a pretty quality outing for the Tigers, who moved to 13-1 moving into the final pre-conference weekend. North Dakota State will get on out of here. They are 1-11 on the season, and I tend to believe they're going to be a bit of an RPI drain. But Jay Johnson disagrees. He thinks they're going to win a ton of games. He knows a lot more than me, but we'll see whether or not that does happen. That's our Genesis opening drive, brought to you by Genesis of Baton Rouge. When we come back, Luke Johnson talking some Saints on the Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Genesis of Baton Rouge. GenesisofBatonRouge.com is the website. Every single car that's on the lot is online at GenesisofBatonRouge.com. How about some of the features when you purchase a new Genesis? 10-year, 100,000-mile warranty. 10 years, 100,000 miles. 3 years of complimentary maintenance. 3 years is a long time. I can vouch for that. I've got a 3-year-old kid. It feels like a long time. To have complimentary maintenance over that span, that's a really good thing. And it's complimentary valet maintenance as well. They'll come get your car. They'll bring it back to the dealership at Airline and PQ. They'll do the service work. They'll leave you a loaner. Then they'll bring it right back to you when it's done. You get on your way. It's convenience. It's luxury. It's Genesis of Baton Rouge, the only fully exclusive Genesis dealer in the state of Louisiana. If you're in the market for a Genesis, not sure about the Genesis lines because you've never been behind the wheel or in one, that wouldn't be shocking. A lot of folks haven't. Check them out at Airline at PQ, right across from Women's Hospital. It's Genesis of Baton Rouge, online at GenesisofBatonRouge.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
Working towards the weekend, Thursday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show. Luke Johnson, good enough to give us his time on Thursdays. He covers the New Orleans Saints for The Advocate. Joined us on the Jim's Firearms Hotline. Luke, how are you?
Doing great, man. Thanks for having me on.
It is our pleasure. How was your Mardi Gras, Luke? It appeared you were having quite the time.
Thank goodness that Instagram account is private. I was having a great time, man. It was really good. Yeah, all jokes aside, I mean, like it was cool doing it with my daughter, who's going to be turning 2 in May. This is like her first time, like really getting what Mardi Gras was about. So that was a lot of fun. And then I had one solid day to myself where I didn't have to worry about being a dad.
I like to hear that as well. Glad y'all enjoyed your time. All right, Combine is in the rearview mirror. Coaching staff essentially kind of put to bed here. So where does your focus with the New Orleans Saints turn to at this point in the calendar?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, it's how they're going to get under the cap, and not only just being compliant. Like they're going to be making a lot of moves, I think, because they want to be more active in free agency than they were last year. They only signed one guy last year to more than a 1-year contract. That was Cedric Wilson. It's not like exactly something that's going to break the bank. I would expect them to be a little bit more aggressive this year, which means not only are they going to have to clear the $40 million to be compliant, they're going to have to clear more than that to be able to sign players. So I mean, we should have a pretty good idea in the next 36 to 48 hours as to like who they're going to whose contracts are going to touch. I think there's probably only like 8 or 9 guys in the roster who they can really, truly restructure to create space. I would expect most, if not all of them, to get done. And maybe some guys taking pay cuts as well. There's just going to be a lot of moving parts in the next couple of days.
They're always going to get under the cap. They do it every single year at this time. But generally speaking, when they were doing that over the last, before 3 years ago, you thought they were trying to build toward a contender. And I think most people from the outside feel like that's not necessarily the case right now. So when a Saints fan hears that they're going to spend some money and gets a little bit nervous that may continue the issues with the salary cap moving forward, what would you say to that Saints fan?
I mean, I would say those are valid concerns. I think a lot of people are just like, why don't they just hit start on the rebuild and eat their medicine and just kind of deal with a rough year or two. But I think, I don't know. I think there's always a sense when you're around a bunch of competitive people that you're just like a couple of good moves away. You're a really good draft class away from being relevant again. I don't know if I agree with that, but I think that's kind of where they're at right now. So I don't really know how to answer that, because I think if it were me, I'd be doing this a little bit differently. But unfortunately, they're making a lot more money than I am to make these decisions. So that's kind of the path they're going to take. And who knows? I mean, like, we've seen teams be in this kind of like non-competitive, middle ground, irrelevant place, hit on a draft class and be, a contending team within a year or two. Like it can be done, but they've got a pretty like limited needle to thread here.
Obviously, they cut Jamal Williams. That doesn't save him a ton of money, but it does save him just a smidge. Is there anybody else that you would look at that they may terminate a contract here or there to save cash?
I don't think they have like a lot of really appealing options for that. It's just because of the way they've managed the cap in recent years. It makes it hard to just cut somebody and recoup some cap savings. The only guys you really look at are guys like Colin Saunders or Cedric Wilson, and those are moves that are going to save you like maybe $2-3 million. The biggest chips they have are the restructures. They can clear up $31 million by restructuring Derek Carr. They're going to have a $70 million Carr issue next year on the salary cap. But I think that's something they're going to live with if they want to be not only compliant but in a position to add. So there's not really a lot of like, then cut this guy and recoup some savings. It's just not what they have on this team right now. But I do expect like a lot of restructures, maybe some pay cuts, and see where they go from there.
Is there a position or two that you feel like they'll be more aggressive than others in free agency, or is it just kind of if they find a really good player?
Well, I mean, like I think my whole take on this is that they have so many spots at this roster where they need help. Where if they feel like they can find somebody who they can buy low on and maybe get some really good production out of. Like I think like the Willie Gay signing last year, right? I think that was a pretty good roll of the dice, like $5 million on a guy with good traits who's been a good player in the NFL. Obviously, like the role didn't pan out for him last year here, but like that's kind of the sort of signings I'd expect them to make. And if I'm looking at this team, I think one of the sneaky needs that I don't think they can just like count on the draft to address is corner. It's been a really solid area depth-wise within the last couple of years, but you look at who they have under contract right now, it's Alontae Taylor and Kool-Aid McKinstry and not much else. It's something that I think they're going to need a lot of help at. So that'd be, I don't think there's a corner that you can look at in this draft and be like, yeah, we want to take him at number 9, like a surefire, like top 10 lock type of player. I think it's a little bit more deep in the like the pass rushers, offensive linemen in this draft. So like if that to me is like an area you can address in free agency, and maybe like one of those kind of like the bendy, undersized edge rushers that they've never had on this team under Dennis Allen. Maybe you can find one of those in free agency that can help you out. But again, they're going to be limited with what they can do. Even though they want to be more aggressive, they just aren't going to have the space to make a big splash signing.
Do you think that Paulson Adebo's injury makes it more likely that the Saints could re-sign him?
No, I don't actually. I think he's like pretty well recovered from that. From what I gather at the combine, it was an injury that was a terrible injury and ended the season, but it's not like not like something that requires this big long rehab to come back from. It's just kind of a clean break, and he's healthy now. And the fact is that you don't really see 25-year-old corners who have a good history of production at the NFL level reach free agency very often. Like, he's going to have some suitors, and I think that's going to make him tough for the Saints to bring back.
That's fascinating. Tyrann Mathieu is a guy that was potentially reported that the Saints could move on from. Do you expect him back?
I do. I just think it's the conversation's the same with Tyrann as it is with Demario Davis and Cam Jordan and Taysom Hill. It's like moving on from these guys is not really going to get you much in terms of flexibility. So, like, really, if you move on from them, it's just because you don't want them on your team anymore. And I think Tyrann's still a good enough player to where, if you're going to be paying the $9 million in cap charges, regardless of whether he's on your team or not, you might as well just keep him there because he's still good, and he's also just like an important person to have in the locker room. So I'd be surprised by Tyrann. I think there's a chance that they could try to approach like Cam or Taysom on a pay cut. I don't know if they'd be open to that. But like Tyrann took a pay cut last year, Demario took a pay cut last year. I'd be really surprised if they got them to do that again. So I think that to me is pointing toward Tyrann being back. But we'll see. We'll see what this whole staff thinks of these players as players. Like if they move on from them, it means they don't think they're good enough players to be on the roster anymore.
What do you think about Chase Young's market on the free agency scape?
I think it'll be a little bit better than last year because I think he put some of the health concerns behind him. I think that was really the main thing working against him last year. He's not like the superstar player that everybody thought he was going to be when he came into the NFL, but I think he's still a good player, and he's still really young. He's only like 25 or 26 years old. So there's going to be interest in him, and I think he'll get like a multi-year contract. It just won't be like the $25-30 million deal like everybody was anticipating he'd sign eventually when he was like the defensive rookie of the year. I think it'll be probably closer to what he made for the Saints last year, somewhere in the $13 to $15 million range, but like more than 1 year on it because he's shown he can be healthy.
Quarterback's the last question I'll ask you. Derek Carr is the big headline here, but do you feel like there's a pretty good chance that they go to week 1 next year with Derek Carr, Spencer Rattler, and Jake Haener and nobody else?
I think they might add a veteran backup, but like I don't think it'd be like a name. I think they'd probably feel pretty comfortable with Rattler as the two, and I don't really see the point in going out and adding somebody like let's just say Jameis Winston. Yeah. If you already feel comfortable in your two, and most teams don't even carry 3 quarterbacks active on the game day roster. I guess it would depend on what Kellen Moore's thought about the whole thing is. Like, do you want to be in a situation like they were in last year where your starting quarterback gets hurt and then you're just basically just like tanked for the rest of the year? Like, do they feel confident enough in Rattler to go win games as opposed to just like developing on the field? I think that's the only way they bring in like a veteran to be like the true backup while they develop. But I think I would lean more toward just keeping Rattler and Haener as the 2 and the 3.
News never stops on the NFL level. You're looking for your Saints news. No better spot than Luke Johnson with The Advocate at by Luke Johnson. He's with us on Thursdays. Appreciate your time, man.
Appreciate it, buddy. See you.
We will. We'll see him very soon. Look, it's an interesting time I'm less interested, quite frankly, and we'll talk about it as it happens. I'm less interested in the actual players the Saints bring in one by one. I'm more interested in what the plan looks like, because we don't really know right this second what the entrance to this Kellen Moore era is going to look like. I think most people I've talked to that are fans of the Saints want the Saints to pull back and try to get into a little bit more advantageous salary cap situation, but the Saints aren't willing to do that more often than not. It looked like entering the last season when they only signed a couple of guys to 1-year deals, kept things like Willie Gay, 1-year deal, Chase Young, 1-year deal, just kind of keeping things between the buoys, not doing anything crazy. But you restructure Derek Carr and kick $70 million down the curve, and then you start adding guys that are 30 years old to your roster for big money. Like, I start converting bonuses and stuff. Like, all of a sudden, I'm going to sour pretty quick. It's like that just feels to me like continuing to swim upstream. Now, if they continue to go out and sign guys on one-year deals and they let some of these contracts come off the books and they don't do anything drastic with cars, so you've got an off-ramp with them and you feel like you might be closer to the full reset where you can finally breathe, that will be encouraging. I realize that's not a lot of fun as a fan to sit through, but if you're trying to get back to a championship level, it feels like you got to change the way you're doing things. And that, to me, is the story into this now roster composition portion of the offseason. Do the Saints take a different path? And I'm curious to see whether or not they do that. So our Saints coverage you can find on YouTube, Hunt on Saints. Also anywhere you find your podcast, Hunt on Saints. Anywhere, again, you find your sound, you can search Hunt on Saints and you can find it all year round. We'll come back, talk some LSU football. 3 guys on the offense to watch in spring football. That's next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Highland Insurance Group, HighlandIG.com is that website. Jonathan Carver and his team, fantastic folks to work with in the insurance game. There's always another hurricane season right around the corner. The time to think about dealing with that is not when there's one out there in the Gulf and there's a moratorium put on all new coverage. The time to think about your insurance policy, specifically from a property perspective, is right now. Call Jonathan Carbo and his team and see if they can't help you placing your property in a different market. They've got dozens. They're an independent broker, so they can find the best market for you. And maybe it's a situation where you've got to do a layered program. One company's got to take this, one company's got to take that, one company, and you layer it up to get to your limit. If that's the case, Jonathan Carver and his team can do that. They are experts when it comes to the technical aspects of the insurance game. If you're a business owner, you'd like to learn more, it's Highland Insurance Group. You can find them online at HighlandIG.com. That's HighlandIG.com.
This is the Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
LSU spring football right around the corner. They will crank things up out on the Ponderosa. Saturday will be there when available to give you some practice reports over at LouisianaSports.net and certainly here on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge. But yesterday I gave you 3 defensive players I would have my eye on in the spring football window. Today I give you 3 offensive players that I'm going to have my eye on for different reasons in said spring window. I kind of led my piece on LouisianaSports.net with this. When you talk about entering spring football, same thing with the defense, but we'll move it to offense today. Like, you've got your play caller back. That's the tip of the spear. And then you've got your quarterback back. So from that perspective, you've got a lot of continuity at the top end of your offense. There's a lot of moving parts around those 2 guys, but those are the 2 guys that set the tone entering the spring and make it, to me, kind of hopefully a little bit of a boring spring from that perspective. You're not installing a new system. You're not breaking in a new quarterback. You've got those 2 guys who had their first shot last year. I think it went well. You could disagree. Certainly they had their issues in the second half in College Station. Certainly they had their issues against Alabama. I wouldn't call Florida a banner day. I think they had their issues in the opener against USC as well. But I think those 2 guys in their first seasons, Joe Sloan calling plays and Garrett Nussmeier at quarterback, were good. They need to be better. If LSU is going to be a championship level team this year, both guys need to be better. Nussmeier's got to take care of the football a little bit better. Sloan's got to find a little bit more consistency in the running game. You need to just be a little bit more consistent overall. But those are the 2 top guys on this offense. You move down to the people around them, and there are 3 guys that I want to watch. We'll start with Josh Thompson. Now, Josh Thompson comes from Northwestern. He has started there for a couple of years, started 11 games at right tackle in 2023. This past year, spent the season when he wasn't hurt at right guard. He's 6'5". He's 300 pounds. He's a bit of a tweener. And so this is the issue with Thompson. And this is maybe less about Thompson and more about the guys around him, in fact. But he feels a little bit light to play guard and maybe a half step slow to be an elite tackle. He's kind of a tweener. I think he's a proven starter in the Power 4, and I think he's going to play where LSU needs him to play. So whether you want to say that Josh Thompson has to have a big spring in his 5th year in college football, or you would rather point to Tyree Adams and or Weston Davis to say those guys need to have a big spring to move Thompson inside if those guys can man the tackle spots, That remains to be seen. But you understand that the offensive line is a huge focal point in spring football this year. Honestly, Brad Davis is probably the most important guy here. But Josh Thompson, as a former starter at Northwestern, a guy that Tennessee wanted, a guy that Ohio State was in on, a guy that Auburn wanted, a guy that LSU got, he's going to factor in, but where? And I'm very curious once we get out there for some of the individual and then into the team periods where Thompson is working out. We may not find out our final answer here in the spring, but you can at least get a look at where they feel like he can help them most. So Josh Thompson is my first guy that I would go to here. Nick Anderson is number 2. I'm really excited about Nick Anderson, but I still feel like this is a big spring for him. Nick Anderson is 6'3", 6'4". He runs really well. 2 years ago, he had the Oklahoma freshman record for touchdown catches, had a monster season in Norman with Dylan Gabriel as the quarterback. Here's the deal. Berrien Brown and Chris Hilton can fly, but they're 6 feet tall. Kylan Billiott's 6'3", but he's never caught a pass in college. Anderson's the only guy that comes in with the size, speed, production profile. He's it. So most people in that situation, it's his 4th year in college. He's already proven he can do it. Like, this would not be an important spring for most juniors, redshirt juniors who have already been there and done that. But look at Anderson. Played 1 game last year and no games 3 years ago. 2 years ago, great, 10 touchdowns. But he's basically played 1 out of the last 3 seasons. That's one reason he needs reps. 2, he's learning a new offense. That's a reason he needs reps. 3, he's got a new quarterback that he's got to learn to catch from. That's important. So you're talking about a guy who hasn't played a lot, learning a new system, breaking a new quarterback. Nick Anderson needs reps in the spring. Needs reps with Garrett Nussmeier in the summer. Needs a fall camp full of reps because he is still getting up to speed. Now, I talked to Brandon Drum up there in Norman, who covers Oklahoma and covered Nick Anderson for 3 years, and asked him about the injury that kept him out this year. And it was a weird deal where it was like a hip, and then it was a quad, and they weren't really sure. And then he tried to play in a game, and then he didn't play, and then he sat the rest of the time. And like, nobody that I've seen, I talked to him, I've read on I don't know what the injury was. I honestly don't know. I realize that's not awesome from the guy who covers the team to not be 100% sure, but I tried. I tried to read. I tried to talk to somebody up there. I'm not really sure, but I'd like him to be healthy, and I think we'll see whether or not he is coming up in the spring. So number 1 is Josh Thompson. Number 2 is Nick Anderson. Harlem Berry is number 3. Harlem Berry is a guy that LSU has recruited for almost 5 years. He's here. You've got a running back room that's got Caden Durham in it. He's the lead back. Then after that, it's Caleb Jackson. Trey Holly's not here. You don't have anybody from the portal. Josh Williams is gone. It's kind of JT Lindsey and Harlem Berry. So there are plenty of reps to be had. And Harlem Berry needs to get them because, 1, he's acclimating to college. 2, he's coming from a low level in Louisiana high school football where he's going to have to acclimate to the speed of the game a little bit. And 3, LSU staff's got to figure out how to use Harlem Berry because this is a guy that has, and trust me, I'm not comparing them apples to apples. This is stylistic. It's not production. We're talking about a Heisman winner in the 2nd pick in the draft here in Reggie Bush. But I think most people suggest if you played Reggie Bush in the slot at USC, he'd have lit it up. Like, I don't want to put Derrick Henry in the slot. Same type of accolades that Reggie Bush had in college and then into the pros. Better in the pros, significantly. But different style. I don't want Leonard Fournette playing in the slot. I don't want Caden Durham playing in the slot. Harlem Berry could play in the slot if he wanted to, by all accounts. He's incredibly athletic, incredibly quick, smooth in and out of breaks, can catch the ball. Do you want to get that involved in a big way? Show that in the spring. Not to us, but to him. Do you need him to get more physical and learn how to run between the tackles with 300-pounders in there on defense, which he did not see at St. Martin? Well, this is a time to do that. You've got a chance where Harlem Berry came to campus in December. So he will have been on campus for almost 10 months when he plays his first game at Clemson. I think it's a big spring for him as well. and a big spring for the staff to figure out what is his best role in the offense. Is Caleb Jackson going to be more involved than he was last year because you feel like you've got a more downhill running game that fits his style better than last year? Or is Harlan Berry the second back and you move Caleb Jackson back a little bit? Or is there a situation where you want to get Jackson on the field with Caden Durham? There are a lot of different things you can do with him. So to me, these are the three biggest spots. Like I could tell you for sure Tyree Adams, Cohen Eccles, Weston Davis, even DJ Chester moving from center, we think, with Braylon Moore coming in. Like, there are a lot of guys up front that I could talk to you about. I can talk to you about Barry Brown learning how to play in a functional offense. I could go to Bauer Sharp needing to improve on what he did last year at a spot where he's going to be asked to play a lot. I go to Trey'Dez Green, who's going to go from freak athlete who made a few catches to potential focal point in the passing game. Like, there are a lot of guys on this offense that you could point to and say, hey, I need that guy to produce, and let's see a big spring from him. But these are the three that I picked out. Josh Thompson, where does he fit on the offensive line? Nick Anderson, assimilating to a new school, new offense, new quarterback, coming off of injury, need him. And look at Harlan Berry. What are they going to do with the 5-star running back from the New Orleans area? You pair those three with the guys that I talked about on defense yesterday. That's Patrick Payton on the defensive side. That's DJ Pickett on the defensive side. That's Dominic McKinley on the defensive side. There are a lot of guys at LSU that need to have big springs. These are the guys that I have pegged at this point. If you want to read about it, you can at LouisianaSports.net. Beck, what do you have to say about these young fellows that I picked up in spring football? I know that spring football is not a big deal, and I honestly believe that when we go out there and cover it, it's pretty damn boring. But I do think that there are some guys that need to take some steps this spring.
Yeah, I can't remember. We did a article after the transfer portal trying to just everyone gave their opinion on who they thought the most important transfer was. It's hard to go back and find it on the website because it was so long ago. But I'm pretty sure I had Nick Anderson just because you're losing so much production, and so you're going to need somebody to step up. And I think Nick Anderson is going to be that guy. I mean, we like you said when we talked to Brandon Drum about him, he just had all positive things to say and thought he was a really good playmaker, just got injured. So I think he's gonna be the guy that has to step up and really produce in that second or third spot for the receiver.
We'll see. They're not giving us the robust access to spring ball that we have gotten over the Kelly era, specifically in the fall. They have let us watch a ton of fall camp, which quite honestly, in August, like, I'm all about giving us some access to fall camp because there's a lot of content to be had there. In the middle of March Madness and baseball and women's basketball making a push and all that kind of stuff, like this can get buried a little bit, especially when you give us 20 minutes of guys running around cones. That's not a ton of content that be gleaned from that. But I'll have my eyes on these guys, and I'll bring back some reports when we have an opportunity to go out there and check out spring practice. Again, they'll crank things up on Saturday out at the Ponderosa. Let's take a time out. We'll come back and close out hour number 1. It's a Thursday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show. You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
Wrapping up hour number 1 here. I was just scrolling through Twitter about 20 minutes ago, and the folks over at 64 Analytics have got some college baseball stats up, and they put a screen grab up that honestly caught me a little bit by surprise. Beck, I don't think you've watched every pitch LSU has thrown, but you have a general feeling of how the season has gone to this point, player by player. Give me a reasonable answer if I ask you how one guy was doing at this point.
Yeah.
Stephen Milam's got 54 at-bats this season. How many strikeouts do you think he has?
2.
1. 1 strikeout and 54 at-bats.
That's pretty good.
Now, look, here's the deal. And this is going to be something that I talk about a lot next week. LSU was in a very similar spot last year to where they are now. We talked about this with Koki Riley yesterday, and I could make the argument the offense has been more complete than it was last year and all that well and good. But LSU, they lost a game to Stony Brook last year, but for the most part, they were really good in the pre-conference. They went to Houston, dominated, played great, crushed Rice, swept 3 games in Astro Stadium. It was good. It looked really, really good. And then the bottom fell out when they got to SEC play because you played really good teams. You played Mississippi State on the road. You played a really good Arkansas team. You played a really good Florida team. You played a really good Tennessee team. Like it was tough. And you haven't seen that yet, so we're not really sure. But a statistic like that makes me feel pretty good because I understand the level of pitching that you're seeing, and it's not 96, and it's not a lot of wipeout breaking stuff. But to have a guy go up there and hit the ball hard as consistently as Milam has, and he's hitting 370, but to not swing and miss and to have good at bats that consistently and not strike out ever is encouraging. And we saw Stephen Milam at the end of last year be awesome. Like, we know what he's capable of. But the other piece to this discussion, when I talk about Stephen Milam, who's hitting 370, who's only struck out once, who's hit the ball out of the ballpark twice, and who's got 4 doubles and has come up with some really clutch hits, which he did back on Tuesday. And then I pull up the lineup card, and Stephen Milam is hitting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th. And then you go down and you look at Chris Stanfield, who's hitting 9th, who was in the leadoff spot and led Auburn in multi-hit games last year. The length of this lineup feels like it's legitimate. I'm not here to stamp the flag in the ground just yet. I need proof of that concept 4 weeks from now over one more non-conference and 3 SEC weeks. And at that point, I'll probably feel like I can sit here and tell you with more certainty what we've really got here. But I'll tell you this. I would rather Daniel Dickinson be hitting 391 against these garbage teams than 265. Doesn't mean he's going to be able to hit SEC pitching. We haven't seen it yet. But you face the best pitching you've seen thus far in Frisco, and he hit the ball really hard and hit out of the ballpark. So I'm not talking about Jared Jones. He's a given. I'm not talking about Josh Pearson or Michael Braswell. You kind of know what those guys are. And Milam's got a track record. But I love the fact that statistic pops at me, the 1 strikeout. I didn't realize that. I think I've watched almost every pitch. But that's an incredible go of it. And you're not hitting him first or second. He's down in the 5-hole. And it's part of this, and now that I've heard Jay say this a few times, I start to look for it. This deal where I want us to, every inning that you see on the due up when they go to commercial break, every inning, you should look at that and go, okay, they got a pretty good chance to score. He doesn't want to see an inning where you've got the defensive catcher who's hitting $190 and the defensive center fielder who's hitting 225 and the big slugging outfielder or DH who has 11 home runs on the season, but he leads the team in strikeouts. Like, he doesn't want that inning to come up. And at this point, you don't really have that. Speaking of few strikeouts, like Jake Brown is in this discussion as well. Jake Brown has 35 at-bats this year in a little bit of a platoon situation. He's started 10 games, played in 14, but he's got 35 at-bats, and he's hitting 343. He's only struck out once in 35 at-bats. That's a guy who doesn't have a proven track record. That's a guy who last year started a lot, but didn't hit. Look at his SEC statistics from last year. They're not good at all. He was trying to make the adjustment from two-way guy to pitcher to back to hitter, and like it just he wasn't great offensively last year. But he's a great athlete. He's a good defender, and they trust him a good bit. And now you're looking at a guy who, through 35 at-bats, has 4 walks, just 1 strikeout. He's got 3 doubles, and he scored 10 times. He's been very productive, and that's not a guy at the top of your order. It's the length. It's the depth. It's the consistency. All that's very, very important, and I think LSU has done that to an extent. This entire conversation is, of course, framed by knowing the competition level has been terrible. Omaha's bad. North Dakota State's bad. Purdue-Fort Wayne's bad. Like you're Southern's bad. Like you're playing bad teams. I get it. But I'd rather it look like this to start than the alternative. Ask the folks over in College Station. It can go south in a hurry. And you saw it last year, right when they started SEC play. So I'm encouraged by some of that, and I just honestly wanted to point out the fact that Stephen Milam and Jake Brown have struck out one time each, so that's 2 in how many bats? Can I do quick math on the air? 89, got it easily. So, look, 89 at bats, 2 strikeouts for those two guys. That's pretty good considering just about any collegiate competition that those two guys have been able to hit the ball that consistently. So that's a little look at LSU baseball here to close out hour number 1. Excited for hour number 2. Got a lot to get to here. Chris Blair is going to join us at 2:15. Voice of the Tigers. We'll talk a little bit of basketball, but mostly baseball with Chris, as the basketball team's got one game left to play in the regular season. Joe Healy, D1 Baseball, is going to be with us at 2:30 to set the stage for another weekend in the Southeastern Conference, the final pre-conference weekend. I know that Joe Healy and his whole staff over there at D1 Baseball had extensive conversations about who the number 1 team in the country should be. Should it be LSU? Should it be Tennessee? We'll get Joe's thoughts on that at 2:30, as well as a little snapshot of what's to come this coming weekend. So if you missed any of the first hour, catch it on demand. 1045ESPN.com's on demand tab, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google. Wherever you find your sound, you can always find us. Search Hunt Palmer Show. Like, subscribe, rate, and review. That helps us a ton. We'll step aside for Sports Center and come back with the second hour of a Thursday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Audio Video Security Solutions, avssla.com is that website. Check them out on Instagram. AVSS_BR is their Instagram handle. And it's got great examples of some of the work they have done. They've got man caves. They've got outdoor kitchens, pool house areas. They go out and do decks if you've got a property on the water, whether it's your primary residence or secondary residence. They can handle all of those types of things for you, and there are examples of some of the great capabilities that they have at their Instagram pages at AVSS_BR. I can promise you I'm not telling you a lie because, look, the folks at the Parade of Homes agree. They awarded AVSS the People's Choice Award for the best vendor at the Parade of Homes. Give Mitchell Fisher a call. It's 225-439-7920 for all of your audio, video, and security needs at home. It's Audio Video Security Solutions online at avssla.com.